Welcome to the show. My name is Karen Holton. I am an ET experiencer and ambassador, an ascension coach, a direct channel, a shamanic guide, and I'm the host of Aliens and Astrology. Be sure to check out more of my unique content on my website, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, and my YouTube, Odyssey, and Telegram channels, Karen Holton TV. I can also be found on the Forbidden Knowledge News Network, www.forbiddenknowledge.news. My paranormal experiences have taught me to replace my beliefs with working theories, which evolve over time. My co-host is Dave Petrella, and although we hold two different viewpoints, we both see things from the same broad perspective, and we are both passionate about the ascension process.
Hi, I'm Dave Petrella. I'm an astrologer, biologist, spiritual guide, and Oak Island theorist. You can find me on Facebook and YouTube at Dave Petrella, and on Instagram at Dave Petrella12. Please feel free to send me an email through my YouTube page. I'm happy to join Karen in our search for truth. We can find the answers we're looking for about health, science, extraterrestrial intelligence, and many other related topics. We're glad to have you join us today for the show.
Hi, everybody. Dave and I are back for another interesting episode of Aliens and Astrology. And today, Dave's going to tell us more about astrology. How does it work? What can it do for us? That kind of thing. So I'm basically just going to turn it over to Dave, unless you have any announcements, Dave. And we'll just get on with astrology and you.
All right, great. Thanks, Karen. No announcements right now. Just appreciate everyone that continues to watch our show and finds it useful. Me and Karen really try to get things clear for people, come up with proactive ways to help. And that's what it's going to take. I think we're getting somewhere for sure in terms of the world trying to wake up here. And so, we can probably just get right in the slideshow, Karen, if you got that ready to go.
Sure.
So what I'm gonna do today, guys, is I'm just gonna talk about the basics of astrology, basics of how it works, and also what you can expect from it, why it's important, why why it's helpful, and then we'll go into maybe towards the end more specifics, and we'll kind of get a conversation going as well. But I want everyone to see that it's the underpinning for the solar system, essentially. And specifically, what I would say is for the Earth system, since this is where we live. If you want to understand the Earth, you want to fully understand the Earth, and you don't understand astrology, you're going to get maybe like 15%. Okay, because this is actually the framework for all of the energetic systems on the planet. It has to pass through the zodiac, and then it has to pass through all the planets and everything. We'll talk about what that means as we go along here. Okay, so this first graphic is it's essentially the seasons. People are familiar with the seasons. We know that obviously when it gets hot, and then it starts to cool down. You head towards the fall, then you head into the winter, which is the coldest, and then you're back up towards the spring. And it's called the year. It's the yearly cycle. Well, that cycle is based on the sun, and it's the sun's cycle, which is 365.25 days. And the 0.25 is because every 4 years, of course, we have that leap year, and then it makes it 366 total. And so you have to account for that extra quarter of a day every year, because otherwise it's going to be off. It's over a 4 year, a 4 year cycle that you get the full year measurements. So in any case, in traditional astrology, the year it really kind of always starts with the spring equinox. And something that's really interesting about that is that actually, if you look at the names of the months, starting with September, and you go all the way to December, September is referring to 7, that's sept, and December is referring to 10, which is obviously the 10th. It was the original 10th month, I'll put it that way, if you start the year from the spring equinox, which is around March 20th every year. And then you've got January, which would be the 11th month, and then February, which would be the 12th month, and then you end up back at the first month, which is March, and it's really Aries that kicks off the zodiac. So in any case, that's important because throughout history, people have changed the time cycles. They've changed calendars, sometimes on purpose to keep us in the dark, so that only they know what the power days are, and only they know when the times are coming, eclipses and important events and stuff like that. So it's part on purpose manipulation, and part of it is I also believe we've just really gotten really, really lax on the science, and a lot of people have just forgotten, Karen, to be quite honest. It's like we used to know it, and then when we got our phones and computers, actually way before that, really, but everyone shifted their focus over to other things. And then when you're focused on other things, you don't have time for some of the original teachings. And even actually, a lot of the native cultures have been dealing with that. I've talked with quite a few native tribes, and they're dealing with that issue, is that, we want to make sure the kids keep our traditions going, but it seems to be less and less every year of people who are actually interested in doing that. And to me, it's a serious problem, because that's how you lose your traditions. That's how you lose your culture. And that's how sometimes that's how societies end up kind of collapsing, is that you're not preserving any of the integrity of what actually made you who you were in the first place. And then after 50, 60 years, you're looking around like not knowing what to do, not knowing where you came from, not knowing why you don't feel fulfilled, and all that stuff. So it's very important to understand kind of how all this started and where it comes from. And I'll show you where the traditional start of the year is, it's essentially right after the winter solstice. We'll get to that as I kind of get down to that part of the zodiac. But anyway, if you guys want to look to the left, you'll see it says spring equinox. I wrote in resurrection, Easter, Passover. It's all the same concept, the same idea. The Passover refers to passing over the equinox line, and I believe it's the spring equinox line, and I believe it's the first. I thought it was the first full moon after the spring equinox that is considered to be it's either Easter or Passover. It might even be both. I can't quite remember. But the point is that spring equinox line is always that line that gets it kicked off. And so all those events are based on when that equinox happens. And then there's also lots to do with the moon in terms of determining. I think it actually might be Easter, to be honest with you. I think Easter, the reason it changes every year is because it's based on the first full moon. I believe it. I hope that's correct. I need to go check back on that. But anyway, so the spring equinox, equinox means equal night. So that means it's equal day and equal night. And right at the spring equinox, you're getting roughly 12 hours of light and roughly 12 hours of darkness. It depends on where you are on the earth as well, latitude and longitude and stuff like that. It actually varies a little bit. But if you were on the equator, it would be exact. And that's kind of the point, is that the sun, and we'll get to this in a minute, but on the equinox, the sun is actually directly over the equator. Okay, so as we're, again, March 20th, and then as we're moving up heading towards the summer, the sun is, of course, increasing in power. So it gets higher in the sky every day. And it also, you'll notice that the rays get really a lot stronger. They get stronger on the skin. And I'll talk about February in a second, because there's something interesting that I've noticed that happens in February leading up to the spring equinox. I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, it gets stronger and stronger until it gets to the summer solstice, which of course is at the top of the wheel here. This is not technically the zodiac yet, but this is what the zodiac is based off of, which is why I need to start with this graphic so people understand that. So it gets stronger and stronger. It's getting higher and higher in the sky. When it gets to the summer solstice, the sun is at the highest point in the sky. and it's, it's very happy. The sun is kind of rejoicing when it gets to that point. It's really, that's the glory of the sun. In astrology, the references to what's called the midheaven, or the MC, which is the highest point in your chart, which is, again, it's actually your glory. Instead of it being the sun's glory, it's the person's glory, because it's at the highest point in the chart. And then as you're moving on, you get kind of towards, I'll put it this way: the sun's rays are actually the strongest on the solstice, the summer solstice. It's not the hottest air temperature. That comes around August 7th or 8th, typically in the northern hemisphere. And things are offset. In astrology, you don't have everything at the same time. Just like someone who has a certain sign, they have certain gifts and abilities, but they have to, in order for them to have that, they have to not have other ones. You don't get everything. Nowhere in astrology do you get everything. There's always something lacking in every sign and every point that you're at. So anyway, but you'll notice if you go outside on the summer solstice, the sun feels really, really hot on your skin. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And that's because it's at the highest point in the sky. And then as you're heading, of course, now you're heading down. So it's also the longest day of the year. And as you're heading past that, after around June 21st, the sun starts to lose power. And it's losing power, but the air temperature is still heating up due to various things. I would say some of it, I've read a lot about this. I think some of it has to do with how the oceans have had many months to warm up, and it's like a thing that it's like kinetic energies, that the energy is moving. So in order to stop the energy and turn the boat or the ship around, or however you want to explain this in terms of when you're decreasing power, it takes a little while to get that, because there's so much momentum behind it that you're actually not losing that heat yet. And also the ground, of course, warms up a lot when you have months and months of hot sun heating up the ground. It's all part of the same system. It's also something to do with the sun in terms of it being in Leo, that it has a different quality. So it's very interesting to notice this stuff. But if you were to go outside like August 7th or 8th, it's really hot. But the sun on your skin, it doesn't feel like it's searing, like it feels like it's searing you if you're on June 21st. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So as you're going past the summer solstice, the sun's decreasing in power. You'll notice it's actually getting lower and lower in the sky every day. And of course, you have less and less daylight. And then when you get to the fall equinox, which I have over at the right of that chart there, right here. Oh, okay, right. I'll get to that in a second. Then you're at the equinox point, which you're at equal night and equal day. And when you get to the equinox point, it's the start of what we call fall, which is also called autumn, of course. The fall equinox or the autumn equinox is around September 21st to September 22nd. I think even September 23rd some years. It's right around there. And then which happens is you actually, let me back up a second. Starting at the summer solstice, technically it's starting what's called the death of the sun. It's the beginning of the death of the sun, but it's still pretty happy until it gets to the fall equinox, and then it really starts to lose the power. And when you get below that line, you see that I wrote womb and tomb, which is essentially, it's the same idea. It's a very similar word and concept. Is that you're going into the tomb of the earth. The sun is actually dropping below the equinox line. And anything below the equinox line, which is the fall and the winter, is when the sun has minimal power, and it's cold. It's cold because the sun is in the death zone. There's more darkness than there is light, and when you have that, you have more of the dark cycle and more of the dark spiritual things and concepts and things like this. And there's less energy coming to the planet too. Okay, so you enter that cycle, and then of course I wrote death of the sun. That's everything to the right is actually the death of the sun. And if you split this in half, north to south, everything to the right is actually called the west. So, and I know it's opposite to how people look at the compass, and the reason for that is because of the perspective. If you're looking down on the earth from the heavens, which is how the earth was established, then it's actually backwards. So anyway, everything to the right is the west, and that's of course why the Egyptians buried their dead on the west side of the Nile River, because they're saying, okay, this is the death cycle, this is the death direction, and then the east is the birth and the life direction. And then also anything above the line, the equinox line, is the life, and then anything below is also the death. So it's segmented in many different ways. There's really not not a limit to how you can identify the different items in this. Okay, so you hit the fall equinox. Now the sun is dying every day, and it's losing power every day, and because of that, there's more darkness. It's getting still continuing to get lower and lower in the sky every day. And then as you approach the middle of that cycle, you hit what's called the sting of the scorpion. The sting of the scorpion is Scorpio, and we'll get to Scorpio in a minute. But basically, that's when it starts to get serious and actually cold, like verifiably cold in the northern hemisphere. And that actually is only a few days away. It's around November 7th and November 8th every year. And so that's when it gets serious. You know, you better be ready for winter because it is actually going to get cold. And in terms of what I can determine, the Chinese cycle of how they talk about the year and the sun and everything, it's really the start of winter in one sense. Because, and also with the early people, the ancient peoples in Europe, you know, they talked about the Yule and things of that nature. Getting cold, you've got Halloween right there. So there's two ways to talk about the start of winter. The start of winter is either at the center of Scorpio, which is around November 7th or 8th, or it's at the winter solstice, which we're going to get to in a minute. But either way, it represents winter actually very well. Okay, so decreasing in power, and then you get to the very bottom of the chart and you hit the winter solstice. This is the point where the sun is the lowest in the sky in the northern hemisphere, and it's also the least powerful. The rays of the sun are very, very, very weak. If you go outside and it's sunny, you're probably not going to feel anything. You see the sun in the sky, but you're like, it's not warm on my skin, and there's very little power behind it, and that's the reason why. It's at the very bottom of the cycle here. Okay, so then right after the winter solstice, by the way, that's around December 21st every year. So right around the winter solstice, now it's actually a very exciting time, and a lot of the ancient peoples celebrated it actually because it's actually the sun is about to be born again because it's cyclical. So now at that point, you're going to start to, well, it's actually not right at the winter solstice. It's actually a few days after the winter solstice, which is exactly the reason that we have Christmas on the 25th of December, because that's the actual day that the sun starts to gain in power and gain in height in the sky. The 3 days, I say it's 3 1/3 days, actually. I believe it's actually 3 1/3 to 3 1/2, somewhere right in there. And 3 1/3, by the way, is 33. So again, all these numbers are plugged into the matrix of our solar system. They're very important to understand where they come from. It's also the Trinity, of course. The three, it's the Trinity idea. So the sun basically does not move for 3 days, 3 1/3 days. And then on the 25th of December, suddenly we have the birth, which is the birth of, and I'm not trying to be controversial, I'm just stating what it is. It's the birth of the sun in the sky and Jesus, who is also the sun. He's a solar deity. And by the way, Osiris, before Jesus, Osiris was also a solar deity. And Osiris ruled over the winter solstice. So Osiris was the sun at the winter solstice. That's who Osiris is. And so when he's reborn and talking about resurrection and all the same ideas, it's talking about the cycles of the sun. If we didn't have the sun, we would have nothing, literally. No life, no warmth, nothing could survive, according to the current system. So that's why a lot of ancient people worship the sun. And by the way, there's a difference between worshiping the actual sun disk, which they did do at a time in Egypt, and worship. I wouldn't even call it worshiping. I would say it's more appreciating and respecting and being thankful for what the sun is doing for us. And that's not the same as like idolization. It's a very different thing. Okay, so anyway, December 25th, we have Christmas, traditionally the birth of Jesus, because that's also the birth of the sun in the sky. It starts at that point, the 25th, it actually starts to get stronger every day. Okay, so now as we're moving, this is the bottom left of the chart now, as we're moving through this period, you're going to hit, I wrote cross quarter days. Cross quarter days is basically the mid-season point of every season. And it's very important because that's one of the ways to classify seasons. You can talk about seasons with cross quarter days or with the solstice and the equinoxes. You actually kind of have your choice depending on how you want to define it. And people defined it differently in different parts of the world. Okay, so that midpoint is going to be around for the winter season now. It's going to be around February. February. Let me think about this. Now it's actually closer to February 4th, February 4th or 5th, and that's essentially is the coldest, roughly day of the year in the northern hemisphere. And again, it's the same thing we saw when we were talking about the summer solstice, and in terms of it being the strongest on your skin and then being the hottest in Leo, the middle of Leo. Well, this time it's the weakest on your skin in the winter solstice, and it's the coldest in the middle of Aquarius. And that's always how it works that way. There's a little give and take. You don't get everything at one time. Okay, so around that day, actually what I've noticed is it's usually around about February 15th. I actually start and I lived in Alaska for a while, Karen. I think we talked about that. And when I was in Alaska, it's a cold place, guys. I mean, obviously everyone knows that. So you have about 6 months. It's really like 6 months of winter, essentially. It's and the sun is very low in the sky, and there's very little light because you're so far north. A lot less light than even where you are, Karen. A lot less light. And for me, also being in the United States, it's even a lot less for me. Way less for me. And so around that point, I noticed, I can actually feel the rays of the sun on my skin now. And I know it's cold. It still was in, I'll talk Fahrenheit because I'm in the United States. For Fahrenheit, it was still maybe around 40 degrees or something, 40 to 45. But I was pretty happy, Karen, because I could feel the sun on my skin. And I felt it. I felt the warmth on my skin, even if it wasn't warming up the air. The rays are now strong enough that you can actually sense that. So it's a very, very important time there. And then, of course, as you move on, you're going to be back at the spring equinox on March 20th again. And this is the cycle that we go through every single year. The astrology that I do is called tropical astrology. Tropical astrology is based on the cycles of the sun and the planets. And I would consider it to be more accurate, generally speaking, because you're talking about shorter cycles of time. And it's easier to pin down things when you're talking about shorter cycles. If you start talking about longer cycles, which is what Vedic is based on, Vedic astrology out of ancient India, it's still perfectly valid and it's a wonderful science. But it's longer cycles, and you're looking at more longer trends. Whereas the cycle that's based on the year and based on the planets, you're talking about shorter cycles and shorter trends, and it's easier to kind of track where you are. Basically, it's easier to track where you are personally, and also where the solar system is at any given time. Okay, so that's a cycle of seasons, and even in the ancient world, I wouldn't see it's not even that ancient, to be honest. Certainly going way back, but even going a little bit back, if you didn't know when the season started, you literally might starve to death because you have to get the seeds in the ground on time. You don't want the ground to be freezing back and forth again like this. So wherever you were based locally, it was very important to know the cycles of the sun. So you knew when to plant, you knew when to harvest, and then you knew when to clear the fields and till everything and get it ready for this. Actually, it's really interesting. The snow performs a really important function for the soil, and it actually ends up compacting. You've seen this too, Karen, I'm sure, probably a lot. Where you're at, but it compacts all the grasses and the organic debris and everything. It creates really good soil for the spring when everything's ready to go again. So even if people didn't want to do astrology, you still have to know the cycle in order to survive. And now we don't as much because we have food coming from all parts of the world all year, and you have access to whatever you need in most parts of the world. So well, a lot of parts of the world, should I say, certainly in the Western Hemisphere. And so they're not as keyed into this because they don't have to be, but if you appreciate it and you go outside and you say, wow, like for instance, around for me, I noticed it was around February 15th, and you say, wow, I can really feel the warmth on my skin. It's a very joyous occasion because you just went through several months of very cold and you're not feeling any warmth, even if the sun is out. And I'm talking, further latitudes north, especially too. I mean, if you lived in Texas or Florida, you would, it was only, I want to say very short period of time. It might have been 3 weeks in January where I couldn't really feel the sun on my skin, and then it was very fast. It came straight back. I think it came back even, it must have been the last week of January, I could feel the sun warmth on my skin in Florida again. So it does depend where you are locally too. But in any case, this is the system for the Earth, and the Earth does not function without this system. And so the next step is going to be to apply the astrological principles to this chart and the cycle of the sun, and everyone is going to see how it actually fits in. And it actually fits in perfectly, and I don't have to pull anything from anywhere. I literally just like inlay it right on top of this diagram, and it's going to make a lot of sense. But it was very important to establish this system first. Did you have any comments, Karen?
Excuse me, Dave. Yeah, the only comment I wanted to make is I have a lot of experience within the Christian belief systems and also in the pagan belief systems. And what really surprises me every time I see it, as I have today, the pagan system and the Christian system is basically the same system. Now, I don't know about the Vedic systems or the Chinese systems or the Muslim systems, but it just amazes me the similarities and the exact overlap, even to the point of Christmas, and Easter and all the different basic holidays. They all have a perfect correlation, and in fact they're even interwoven with each other, which I always find fascinating, because we tend to see these two belief systems as being at odds, but they're actually basically the same system. I don't know, how do you feel about it, Dave?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's really a world system, and that's why I teach things the way I do, because you have to understand the planets and the stars and seasons and cycles. You have to understand the human body. Then you have to understand spirituality, which means how you are in your heart, how you treat other people, what the point of life is, and things like that. And so if you have the bedrock, which is these sciences, it's astrology, it's the science of the human body, and it's general spirituality, then you can actually understand everything. So now when I see a tradition come up and they say, we celebrate this on this day, I say, yeah, of course you do, because that's where it is in the sun cycle, or sometimes it's actually the moon cycle. Like in China, they use the moon a lot for their zodiac. But yeah, they all kind of inlay on top of each other. It's a really big jigsaw puzzle, and all the pieces have been scattered over the face of the earth. And I've spent, the last, really my whole life, but I mean, very seriously, the last 15 years of my life trying to put this together, because I believed that we couldn't figure it out. Now you can see the point that I'm at least, and I'm trying to help other people to get there if they'd like to, is that you can understand it. It needs to be taught clearly. And before I ever talked about this, I made sure I had a really good handle on it, because I want to be able to address questions and concerns and things. I better be able to come up with good answers, even with things that I'm not 100% on. I better at least know where to look. I should know where to point people, because we need to get the system organized better. But actually, I'll comment really quickly on the pagan and Christian concept, because, by all accounts, well, actually, it's really interesting. There's some traditions in supposedly in early Europe that predated the pagan traditions. I have a friend that talks about the Orlinda tradition, which is really interesting. It is kind of based on some of the Germanic tribes and some of the traditions they had supposedly before paganism in Europe. Now, but in terms of where these things came in, it's really hard to I can't see it. I can't go back and see with my own eyes. If I had that privilege, then I could understand it, definitely. But I'm trying to go kind of blindfolded here to put things together. But the pagan traditions, there's a couple ways of looking at that. There's the connection to the land, which is absolutely essential for any tradition that you're in. I don't care what it is. You need to always stay connected to your local environment and respect it and honor it. And so those traditions were in place. They observe solstices and equinoxes. They track the sun and the moon and the planets and everything, as evidenced by, Stonehenge and Avebury and places like that in the UK. But the other thing is that there's sometimes there's questions about some of their traditions and what they did in their free time. things like sacrifice, animal sacrifice, but also human sacrifice. There's some evidence of that. And then there's also evidence of, overindulgence in food and things like that, and being rowdy. And, so whatever. People have to define it for what they want to define it as. And I certainly don't believe it was only one culture at one time period. I actually think, as always, there's a mix of all kinds of things coming in at the same time. So what I would say to people is, pick the parts that work for you from really whatever tradition you want. Spirituality is not a closed box, guys. So that's one of the biggest things for me is don't feel like you need to be boxed in, or you need to let someone define what spirituality means to you. By all means, pull from we have the whole world of information at our fingertips, So it never bothered me to walk into a Hindu temple, or to talk with pagans, or to even talk with witches. I have no problem with any of this stuff in terms of, let's just see where we are similarly. At the end of the day, I'm going to live the way I do, and you're going to live the way you do, which is fine. But you don't have to separate yourselves and not interact with each other. It's ridiculous. And also, that's the last thing I want to say, is that when Christianity kind of really came into its structure, there was a lot of interesting things going on with empires being built, and principles being kind of changed to appease the general population. And sometimes, I'm actually referring to Constantine mostly right now, in terms of uniting Christianity and everything in Europe, is that you have to make sure that all of the subjects are kind of happy. So what ended up happening was this, and even Catholicism too, even more so, was this combination of all kinds of these religions coming together and creating something that works for the people at the time of the earth cycle that they lived in. There's things, depending on what the outer circumstances are, sometimes your traditions change and shift. Sometimes it's out of necessity, sometimes it's just because of ignorance or lack of information. There's all kinds of ways to look at that. But yeah, essentially it's the same thing, Karen. I mean, the general principles are identical, because that's the only principle that there is on Earth. And when you talk about outside of the Earth, anything is possible at all. But if you want to understand how this system works, you have to understand how it was structured. And it's structured based on astrology. And I should mention this too before we go to the next slide, that there's a term astronomy, and astronomers, and astrology, and astrologers. And the essential difference is that astronomers, they look at the planets in the sky, and they look at the positions of the sun and everything. And they actually agree with the astrologers about where Venus was on November 22nd, and where the sun was, and all this stuff. But they leave it at that, and that's all they do. And they're observing where they are. They don't associate any meaning to it. The only thing astrology is doing on top of that is associating the proper meaning to the positioning of where the planets are. So for me, it's we all need to work together to try to understand this, because you don't have to be polarized in your particular field of study. I can show anyone all of the science that this is based off of, if you give me an honest chance, but you have to give that time. You have to give, I'd say, at least an hour, just to stay focused and try to put your preconceptions aside and try to understand something from the proper perspective. And then if you still don't like it, or you still don't believe it, okay, we all have the right to do whatever we want with it. But anyone who's trying to seriously learn something, you really have to take the time to remove your biases when you're trying to engage in the new topic, and then get into the perspective of the other person. Now, for astrology, it's actually really easy, because it's all based on mathematics and on angles. So I don't have to do any kind of inference at all. I'm actually, I'm a scientist. I'm not really a mathematician. I wish I was better. I have a lot of respect for people who can do math a lot better than I can. That's one of the things I have immense respect for. But, the basic math, being able to divide and add and subtract and, organize things, it's certainly extremely helpful when you're talking about astrology. Understanding, some geometry and the angles and circles and stuff like that. So in any case, that's to give a good bearing for people here, just to understand the beginning of how the sun actually functions on the Earth, and how it creates the seasons, and how it actually divides the year into 4 seasons. And then there's going to be a further division, which is called the 12 signs. And the 12 signs of the zodiac is what we're going to see next. We'll probably go to the next slide, Karen.
Don't skip over this brief commercial break. Dave and I have some important information for you. You may have noticed that participation in our community does not depend on memberships or donations, and we do not hide our episodes behind a paywall. We want everyone to have the opportunity to learn and share our important content with others. Dave and I both offer services which may make your journey more fulfilling, and I offer some products as well. Our sales and services are what provide us with the means to continue our work, as there are many expenses associated with our mission. Check out our offerings to find that which resonates with you to help create a win-win situation. What I mean by that is financial support to help cover our expenses, but also some great products and services to give you that edge that you've been looking for. Check out my online shop, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, to find Zendome's orgone generators, comfort crystals, and an array of vital services, all designed to help you to become the change that you wish to see in the world. Now, more than ever, people are awakening to a world we never imagined possible. In response, Dave and I are offering tools, methods, and podcast content to assist you with your awakening process. You are not alone, and there is still much we can do to support our health, emotions, and our spirituality. We both combine ancient wisdoms with cutting-edge technology to help bring comfort to your body, happiness to your mind, and joy to your spirit. To assist you with your life journey, check out my website and find many valuable resources. There's the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation. This is a free, comprehensive online course. Learn about detoxification and nutrition, grounding and spiritual practices, and an advanced version of the Law of Attraction, giving you more of what you really want out of life. I also have my Zendome's Orgonite, which is my unique brand of orgone generators. They're ethically sourced and handmade by a friend of mine, and they're double charged for maximum effect. I also carry comfort crystals, which is a limited collection of energetically infused semi-precious stones. I have an array of vital services so you can get the one-on-one support that you've been looking for. Also coaching, guidance, and I do assessments and also workshops. And then again, there are the many free resources available on my website. Wisdom to assist with energetic ascension into physical, mental, and spiritual paradise. Also, check out Dave's services. Dave can teach you about astrology and spiritual concepts, principles of Eastern medicine, birth charts, relationship matching, spiritual guidance, fasting, and his unique approach to health. You can find Dave's services on his Facebook page, Instagram at Dave Petrella 12, and his YouTube channel. The links can be found in the description box below. Let us share our quantum work with you. It's your turn to heal, evolve, and thrive. Believe in your ability to succeed. Now, let's get back to the show.
Okay, so now this slide is how the zodiac is actually formed. Now, for people who don't know, the zodiac it's the 12 signs. So if I say, what's your sign? And you say Aquarius, that's one of the signs of the zodiac. And there's 12, and the 12 signs fit within the circle, essentially more or less perfectly, and it ends up giving each sign roughly 30 degrees. And 30 degrees is roughly the month, that's not a coincidence. And the month is based on the cycles of the moon, which is Mon. Mon and moon is the same word. And you're talking about, I believe it's 27 and a half to maybe about 29-day cycle. And it does vary a little bit, but it's right around, it's dangerously close to that 30-degree or 30-day mark. And things are, some of the reason for that, if I created the system, it would be actually perfect. It would be exactly at 30. There wouldn't be 365.25 days, it'd be 360 days. And I actually believe it used to be that way. When it was originally created, I believe that the year was 360 days long and the cycle of the moon was 30 days long. And it was a perfect fit. And the reason that we're dealing with some issues on the earth in these days is because the cycle is slightly off. It's actually not quite on. And that's why when you have things slightly off, you end up with alternate versions of what it should be, in terms of like, I'll put it like degraded. I use that word from the original intention. So in any case, at the top of this one, it says the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun throughout the year. And the path of the sun essentially traces in front of all the constellations. It actually traces kind of across the 12 different signs. And that's what gives you the zodiac cycle. And so when you say, oh, the sun is in the sign of Aquarius, well, what that really means is that from your perspective on Earth, and this is why it's so important where you're born in terms of location for astrology, is that from that perspective, if you look up at the sun, what's directly behind the sun is going to be Aquarius during the period of Aquarius, which is January 20th roughly to February 21st or February 20th roughly. So during that time, the sun is in front of that constellation, and that is what's called the sign. It's your sun sign, which means that they've kind of locked into each other, and they are now associating their energies with each other. And that's what gives the time of the year its quality. That's also what gives the person that same type of quality. For instance, Aquarius has the coldest time of the year, and traditionally Aquarians are said to be some of the coldest people, because look where they are in terms of, when I say cold, I mean there's not more than is needed. You don't have to add the flourish. You make the statement, and people are often feeling like, oh, they wonder, do you care? Do you actually have interest? Are you trying to put me down or tear things down? That's because during that time of the year, and that's not the only quality, Karen. I'm just using it as a reference. Aquarians are wonderful people. They're progressive. They're humanitarian. They're futuristic. They're wonderful inventors. They're extremely intelligent. So there's all kinds of things going on within each sign. But I'm just trying to make the reference that if you look at the Earth and how the quality of the sun feels at that time of year, think about the person who's also born in that time of the year. Their qualities are going to be identical to how the Earth qualities are in that time, and that's how you get your sign. That's why it's called the sun sign, because it's in that sign at that time of year. Okay, so now as we look through this diagram here, over at the far left, again, we're going to see the spring equinox. I'm going to do it the same way I just did the previous chart, and to show people how it all fits in. So the spring equinox over at the far left, and that's going to be around March 20th every year. And then what happens is, you see, I'm trying to see how to explain this. Okay, so the next three pie segments are the first three signs of the zodiac, which are Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. And Aries, Taurus, and Gemini actually make up what is called the spring. But you can actually divide the spring into 3 months, and the 3 months are essentially, if you really want to get down to it, it's not really the month, it's actually the sign. You really want to pay attention to when the sign starts, not the first of the month. You want to pay attention to around the 20th or 21st. I'd say, well, technically, if I want to represent the whole year, I would say the month starts anywhere between the 19th and the 24th of every month of the year. And that's going to be based on the length of the year. The second half of the year is slightly longer than the first half of the year. It shouldn't be, in my opinion, but it is. And that's why we're living in the age we're living in now. And there's a lot of difficulties because it's a little bit off balance. So in any case, you can break up each of the seasons into 3 parts, which is, essentially 3 months or 90 days. And that makes up your different seasons. So the first season is Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. And then you see at the top of that, it says the summer. And you see the line I drew across the top of that, it says the Tropic of Cancer. And I'm sure all of us, at least vaguely remember this when we used to look at the maps when we were in middle school, maybe even high school. You can see, oh, okay, what is this Tropic of Cancer? It says here, everyone knows the equator, right? But a lot of people don't know what the Tropic of Cancer is or the Tropic of Capricorn. And I had no idea, Karen, and it wouldn't have been that hard if people were willing to go into astrology, if there was someone who actually knew how it worked, who could have taught me that, I would have been ready at 10 years old, and that's where I want to try to get to, is that whoever's ready, probably the younger, honestly, the better, is let's get this in front of people and just look at it, guys. If you don't like it or you don't want to focus on it, fine. But this is the missing piece that's not being taught. And I would say even in public schools, you don't have to teach it the same way. I mean, I fully support teaching this in public schools the way that I'm teaching it, not the way that Miss Cleo does it, not the way that maybe some tarot readers are in terms of where they're pulling their energy from if it's questionable. Not all tarot readers do that, but some tarot readers do that. I'm just saying, let's present it as a science, just like you're going to present it as, okay, we're going to have a lesson plan on ancient Sumeria. Okay, so we gave them some time. So now we're going to give some time to the idea of astrology. And it's the same thing. Why did I have to do calculus in high school? I've actually never used calculus outside of that. It's a very important math, but it's like maybe for me, I could have spent a few weeks on calculus, and then let's switch it around. We're gonna do a few weeks with astrology. It's like we have to represent things evenly, and I think we're heading there, especially as the years go on. I think we will get there eventually. Okay, so the top of the chart here, it says the summertime. And I didn't say this yet, but basically the spring begins with Aries, the summer begins with Cancer. So the reason the Tropic of Cancer is called that way is because it's the beginning of summer, and you can see at the very top, the next sign, which is the fourth one there, is Cancer. And that's because Cancer kicks off the summertime, and that's why it's called the Tropic of Cancer. Now, the first day of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, June 21st, the sun is actually directly above the Tropic of Cancer, and that's why it's called that. And that's why we experience the most warmth in the Northern Hemisphere around that time, because it's actually closer. And whichever way you want to look at it is, again, I'm not going into it today, but there's the flat Earth model and then there's the globe model. And whichever way you look at it, I'm just going to make it simple today and say it's closer to you in the Northern Hemisphere at that time. And that's why we experience the most warmth. But the furthest north that the sun is directly overhead is the Tropic of Cancer. It never gets directly overhead anywhere north of the Tropic of Cancer. And that's why anywhere north of the Tropic of Cancer is not tropical, because there's times of the year where it's not that warm, but when you're in the tropics are between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. It's always warm. It's always warm during that cycle. And they have what are called, the dry season and the monsoon season. Essentially, it's not really the 4 seasons like we have in the north here. It's kind of the 2 seasons. It's the wet and the dry. So it's a very different cycle. So anyway, going down from that, the summer kicks off with Cancer, and then it goes into Leo, which is where the sun actually rules Leo in astrology. The sun is very happy in Leo. It's at not really at full power, but it's at full strength, maybe I'll put it that way, in terms of the temperature. But it is dying, and so when the sun is dying, Leo, the lion, is sometimes really lazy. So it's not always the full power. It's sometimes the lion's laying under the tree and they don't want to get up and they just want to lay there for a while. So the sun is, it's losing power, and that's why lions are like that sometimes. They have a lot of fire, but sometimes they just want to chill out and they just hang out and they don't feel like they have to get stuff done. So that's why that is. As you're going from there, you end up with Virgo, of course. It's the last sign of the summertime. It's traditionally called the harvest. And that's where like the wine and the grapes and all that stuff starts to come out. Okay, and then what you have in the middle there is you're actually at the equinox again. It's called the fall equinox. And then now the sun is actually going, I should mention this, that middle line, of course, is the equator. So anytime the sun crosses that line, you have one of the equinoxes, and the sun is directly over the equator at that point. And it's a very, very sacred day, because for the Earth, that's the balance point for the Earth, Karen. It's the equinox, both equinoxes. Everything is in balance. It's half light, half dark. So as you go beneath that, the equator now, you're going to go into the fall season. The fall season kicks off with Libra. It's interesting to note that Libra is, of course, the scales. And the scales is trying to balance 2 different aspects. You're trying to balance the summer with the fall. So it's still kind of in flux, and it's kind of you can think about the scale moving back and forth between the summer and the fall on each side of that. That's why it's kind of like a dual sign. The same thing happens, by the way, with Gemini. Gemini is the last sign of the spring before you hit the summertime, And because of that, it's this play between, and that's why Geminis are so playful, is that it's a play between the spring and the summer seasons. There's two, Gemini is the twin, so there's two components. There's, oh, I want to still be in the spring, and then, oh, no, I want to be in the summer now. Then I'm going to go back to the spring side, then I'll go back to the summer side. That's why Geminis are that way. Okay, so back to the fall season. You got Libra kicking that off, which is the scales of balance. Balance again, the equinox. And then you have Scorpio. I already talked about the sting of Scorpio. Sagittarius is the last sign of the fall. Sagittarius they can be perceived of as very, well, it feels like they're trying to tear things down sometimes, or, call into question things. Sometimes it feels like they're being really insensitive, and it's because the sun is not really that happy. I mean, it's like literally its weakest point, and it's dying. It's still dying. So, how do you think you would feel as someone who's born in that sign? Now, that's not their only feature, but that's the reason why Sagittarius can be that way at times. They're also wonderfully philosophical people. They're always looking for wisdom. They love traveling. They're really fun. They're very funny, very dry humor. And again, that's because it's, the sun is like, well, I'm dying, so I'm not going to be happy about it, but I can still make jokes. It's not that warmth factor. Okay, so then after that, you're going to hit the winter solstice, which, of course, it's on the Tropic of Capricorn, because Capricorn is the sign that kicks off the winter. And the sun is directly above the Tropic of Capricorn, which is very far away from the northern hemisphere, and that's why we experience the cold. Now, I'll just mention this quickly because I find it very interesting. If you're talking about the traditional model, you're talking about the sun being like many, 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 many miles away from the northern hemisphere. But in the flat Earth model, it's actually very, very far out on the flat Earth disk. But during Capricorn, the sun is supposed to be very close to the Earth, but it's very far. It's at the far perimeter of the circle. So it's very far away from the center of the flat Earth, which is, the northern hemisphere kind of borders the center of the Earth in that model. So either way, it's very far away, and that's why it's cold. Okay, so that kicks off the winter time, and then of course you have Capricorn there, and then you've got Aquarius and Pisces, and then of course you see you're back at the spring line, which is a spring equinox line again. And the reason that zodiac is not usually traditionally drawn this way, I always want to give credit to the person that I saw this from. It's of course Santos Bonacci, my friend, and a wonderful astrologer. And this map is based on how the sun is actually moving across the face of the Earth. Now, when he first started, actually, he was teaching it this way, and then he actually updated it to fit into the flat Earth model. And in the flat Earth model, it's actually making a three-dimensional spiral. The shape of the sun is actually making a three-dimensional spiral. It forms something called the analemma, which looks like a big bowling pin in the sky. And that's one of the proofs for the flat Earth theory, that it's actually moving up and down in terms of high altitude to low altitude across or above the flat Earth disk. And when it's really close to the Earth, it's very, very big circles that it's making towards the very edge of the disk. And then when it's in the summertime, it's making very tight circles over the Tropic of Cancer. So it can be formed slightly differently, but think about DNA. It probably is the spiral. Probably a better way to do it, but for simplicity, this is what I want people to see. This actually looks like DNA, kind of, doesn't it, Karen, with that spiral structure?
It totally does, Dave. And I wanted to mention the other thing that it's obviously forming is a sine wave, and everything we experience is also energetic. And so it's definitely a sine wave, which I think is pretty cool too.
Oh yeah, and actually when you talk about how light moves and functions, it's actually the two waves. It's the electric wave and the magnetic wave, and that forms a spiral. So again, we have this spiraling vortex circular pattern, and actually all of the patterns are really based off of that. It's not a flat pattern. There's no way it's a flat pattern. It's in three dimensions. It's actually probably, I would say, in 10 dimensions, but we can only really see, maybe more than that, 10 dimensions plus their inverses. But anyway, just to keep it simple for now, just a I'd like for people just to look at it this way, because it makes it really easy to understand astrology. So this is, again, the path of the sun through the year. It's called the ecliptic. It moves from the equinox at the left to the top, summer, Tropic of Cancer. Then it moves down again to the equinox, and then it moves below to the Tropic of Capricorn, start of winter, and then it moves back up to the to the equator, which is the fall. It's a spring equinox when it moves back up. Depends where you're starting it. I mean, you can start the cycle anywhere you want. I like to do it like this because you can see the full sine wave, and that's really what it is doing. It's making the sine wave. Okay, we can probably move on to the next slide, Karen, unless you want to add something or got a question.
No, but I was going to say the other thing too is all life is made up of biophotonic energy. So it's just so beautiful how the science, all different kinds of sciences, all different kinds of belief systems, even religions, not to mention the seasons and everything is connected. Everything is connected, and it just amazes me. But what I love about your presentation, Dave, is that you really get into it in a way that helps us all to understand.
Right.
So
yeah, I appreciate that, Karen. That's what I want. I want it to be as simple as possible. It's, it took me a long time to understand this, believe me. I mean, even after a couple of years, it's like, well, I'm not sure I'm quite there yet. So it takes a while, but if you learn it like this, I guarantee you it's going to take a huge amount less time. And you don't, get serious about it, but you don't have to like study for hours every day. Just look at it for like half an hour and like just get into a meditative state and think about it. Like the connections you're making, Karen, all the connections are available for us to make with biology. And I'm going to go into that in a second. Talk about biophotons. This applies directly to biology. In fact, that's one of the most important parts of it, is how it actually interfaces with the human body. We'll get into that at the very end of the presentation. Okay, so now this slide, basically what I did is I just took the sine wave and I just made a circle out of it. Again, it's not really flat. Probably not the best way to think about it as being a flat pattern like you can see on the page. It's really more like a spiral vortex, which is kind of what everything is. It's actually how light moves too. It moves in a vortex. Because you have, I believe it's always horizontal. I could be wrong about that, but you have the electric wave going this way. Can you see this, Karen? Can you see my hand?
Yep.
Okay. You have the electric wave going this way, and the magnetic wave is going this way. So when you have that, what you end up with is spin, because they interact with each other. So it's not going up and down like that. It's actually spinning like this, and it's spinning, and it's actually spinning like there's a cycle of spinning that happens too. It's not just like a stationary. It's actually like, doing this in a cycle like that. That's what's actually happening. Actually, really beautiful. It's really beautiful to see that and to try to understand it that way, because it's so perfect. I couldn't have made it. I couldn't have constructed it better myself. I find myself being very appreciative for what we do have. At least the baseline structure of the earth was created with a lot of love and care, and it's there to help us, and it's there to help us to get to better places spiritually as well, and to learn. Okay, so from the previous diagram, all I did was I took the bottom part of that sine wave and I just shifted it over to make the zodiac. And the easiest way to understand astrology is by looking at, the zodiac as it's traditionally depicted, which is how I drew this on this diagram here. Okay, so everyone will remember the first image that I used was a circle, but I only divided it up into the seasons. So this is also, you can divide this into seasons the same way. You can actually overlay it on top of it. You can overlay either of them on top of each other, and you're going to come up with the same mathematical structure. And I'll just say it really quickly, but that the line that goes horizontally, of course, is the equinoxes, the spring and fall equinox. The line that goes vertically through the center are the solstices. And then if you divide each of those in half, then you get what are called the cross quarter days, which is the alternate beginning of the seasons. Let me put it that way, and the alternate ending of the seasons. It's between the traditional equinoxes and solstices. You have the other halfway between, which can start the season and end the season, depending on what system you're actually using. Okay, so over on the left here, again, this is the spring equinox. You ideally always want to start with Aries. Aries is what kicks everything off. It's the fire. It's putting the foot on the pedal and keeping it on the pedal for a long time. The foot does not come off the pedal with the Aries. So that's why Aries they're a fire sign, and they mean business, very serious in terms of getting stuff done. Okay, so you can see actually I listed all of the signs. Again, we talked about how there's 3 signs per season. You can see where they all are in the circular structure here. And then over to the left, you're going to see a couple things. You're going to see the planet. There's a planet I wrote next to each of the signs. And there's an element that I wrote next to each of the signs. And these are not the only things that you can add, but I wanted to highlight these because it's probably the most important. And I'll go through each of them in a second. And then on the inside of the wheel, I wrote cardinal, fixed, and mutable, which indicates that each sign within each season has a different quality to it. And again, this is what makes people the way they are when you talk about astrology, is that it's divided, the year is divided into 12. It's divided into 4, but it's also divided into 12. It's divided into really whatever you want to divide it into, but this is how it was really created, with the numbers that fit in with each other. Of course, 4 can be divided into 12 evenly, and so can 3. And so these are all nice numbers that fit in perfectly with each other. All right, so over on the left there, let's start with, I'm going to go with the planets. I'll go through the planets first. I'll go around the wheel. Then we'll go back and we'll do the, actually, no, let me start with the type of sign. Let me do it that way because that's easier. So Aries is called a cardinal sign. Cardinal means it's the leader of that season. So Aries is the leader of the spring. It kicks off the spring. It's the first sign. It's the cardinal sign. And then Taurus is called a fixed sign. The fixed sign is what's directly in the middle of each season. That's also when the alternate start and the alternate end of the season, they're always on the fixed signs, which is the first graphic at the beginning of the presentation that I talked about. So Taurus, and people will know, I'm sure they know this if they know Taurus. Taurus can be very stubborn people, and they're stubborn because they're a fixed sign. They don't want to move. They're stuck in the middle of the season. That's why it's called the fixed sign. And that's why that person actually is imbued with those qualities, because it's stuck in the middle of the season. So they're stuck on their principles and they're stuck in their routine, their habits, Taurus people. And then the third one there is called a mutable sign. The mutable sign is the sign that's at the end of every season. It's called mutable because it's getting ready to change into the next season. So those people are very changeable people. I mean, like I already talked about Gemini. Gemini can go back and forth. They can be on both sides. They can believe contradictory things simultaneously somehow. I mean, I get how they can do that. I have some Gemini qualities as well. But they're living on both sides of the seasons there, so they're mutable and they're changeable. And then, of course, we'll go through the summer season here. Of course, Cancer is the cardinal sign for the summer season, kicks off the summer. Leo, again, is the fixed sign. Lions can be very stubborn. Again, don't try to move a lion if he doesn't want to move. It's going to be a serious problem. And that's why, because Leo's stuck in the middle of the summer season. So it's a stubborn sign. Can be a stubborn sign, not always, can be. And then Virgo is the mutable sign. And again, Virgo is moving kind of, well, it's on the edge of the 2 seasons there. It's moving in between. And so they can tend to be changeable people, usually having to do with they have a lot of Virgos have a lot of nervous energy oftentimes. So if they're not nervous, they're really relaxed and they're very like sociable people. They like to get out and talk with everyone and everything. But if they start to feel nervous, you're going to see that mutable quality. They'll flip, they'll change a lot. And you'd be like, man, can you just calm down? Like everything's okay. You don't have to worry about it. That's kind of their mutable nature. They're flipping between those 2 balance points. Okay, and then you've got the fall season. Libra is the cardinal sign for the fall. The middle of that is Scorpio. And again, go ahead and try to, well, actually, I'm not encouraging this, but I say, try to mess with a Scorpio and you see if they're going to budge. They don't move. They do not move. So they're stuck in the fixed sign. They're right in the middle of the fall. That's the reason why. And then you've got Sagittarius, which again is a mutable sign. And Sagittarius also can be changeable depending on, what I find with Sagittarius, a lot of it has to do with the stress level. If they're not stressed, then they're really fun, sociable people, and they like to travel and talk about philosophy. But if they feel stressed, they can get kind of abrasive. So that's that mutable quality again, going back and forth. It's on the border between the fall and the winter. And then you've got cardinal sign for the winter, of course, it's Capricorn. They kick everything off. They're very industrious people. They're very good at getting things done. They don't rush necessarily, but they will get it done for sure. And you can count on them to get it done, which is why they're the cardinal sign. And then Aquarius is in the center there. Of course, Aquarius is also the fixed sign. And again, Aquarius can be very stubborn people, especially on their belief system and in their opinions. They oftentimes don't want to budge. And even if you show them something, they still sometimes don't want to admit that it makes more sense than what they were just saying. So that's that stubborn factor. It's because it's a fixed sign. And then Pisces, which of course is my sign. Pisces is the last mutable sign. It's the 12th sign. And Pisces are probably, I might even say they're probably the most changeable people. Pisces are very flexible. They can kind of become whatever they have to be. And that speaks for itself in terms of mutability. So that shows you that all the signs, they're also given a certain type of quality that indicates what kind of a sign they are. And those would be cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Okay, then I'm going to go through the elements quickly. Now, the elements, very important, especially in native culture too. I've talked with some tribes. They actually told me, not all of them, but some of the tribes have told me, yeah, we don't do astrology, but we just work with the elements, which I agree with. I mean, I completely agree with the elements. You could even, I could even erase the signs here, and you could talk about the elements, and I can talk about this first part of the season is based on fire, and then this one's water and stuff like that. You could come out with really good understanding, even if, again, you don't want to talk about astrology. And some natives actually don't want to talk about astrology, but they will talk about elements. And elements are very, very helpful as well. So we'll go through this quickly too. Aries is a fire sign. If you know an Aries, you can see that. I mean, they're all fire. Everything is in intensity, and we're going to get right at it. That's fire. Okay, you got Taurus, which is an earth sign. Taurus are very grounded people. Again, the ground and the earth, they like to be set on the principles. They like to know what to expect. It's called being grounded. That's an earth sign. Then you have Gemini. Gemini is an air sign. And air signs tend to be kind of in the clouds sometimes. So Gemini will be like, so a lot of times people be like, man, where is your head right now? Like, are you even like on earth with us? Or are you floating off into some other zones of thought and stuff like that? That's because they're an air sign. Okay, then you've got Cancer. Cancer, of course, is well known to be a water sign. They're very, very emotional people, the most emotional in the entire zodiac. It's emotions are very like water. They can be likened to that many times when you talk about the aspects of that. And it's they like to be they're very traditional, tend to be traditional, and they're also they like to feel like they are being surrounded by something safe. And water is fairly dense and thick, and so that's kind of that feeling coming from that as well. Okay, then you've got Leo, which of course is, again, it's a fire sign. Leos are very fiery, especially if you try to incite them. You'd really better stand back. You're probably going to be openly insulted by. Actually, Aries or Leo will openly insult people and have no problem with it. Not all the time, but if you want to find a sign that's going to be more likely to do that, you would find the fire signs. Then you've got Virgo. Virgo is, of course, an earth sign. You talk about Virgo, you talk about the harvest, of course, which without the earth, there is no harvest. But they tend to be, they like to know what's coming. They don't like unexpected things, and they like to be grounded because of that, because it's an earth sign. Okay, Libra is the air sign. Again, Libra people, it seems like they have their head in the clouds a lot of times. They live in their own land, their own happy land. You'll see Libras smiling for no reason. Their heads in the clouds. They're thinking about something. They're really, really beautiful people. But that's the air sign quality. Okay, Scorpio. Scorpio is, of course, a water sign as well. And Scorpio have they're changeable. Water is a changeable element, and they like to be able to kind of explore some of the dark, deep, mystical concepts, things that are tend to be kind of thicker concepts, heavier concepts, just like, of course, water is heavier than the air and the fire and everything. But they also, anything that's a water sign can tend to be fairly emotional. So Scorpios have to be careful of that. They won't show it, but they actually do have quite a bit of emotions under the surface. They won't show it because they have to always project that they're in control of every situation, but they tend to be pretty sensitive. They have an outer exterior, but the inside can be sensitive. Okay, then you have Sagittarius, which is the last fire sign. Again, Sagittarius can be very fiery people. And they just they jump right at it. If they have to say something, there's oftentimes no filter. Similar to an Aries, it kind of just comes out, and sometimes that can offend people. So it's often helpful for Sagittarius to try to reel it in a little bit, try to have some more self-control, so you're being cognizant of other people and respecting other people. But Sagittarius, they just jump up and go and get right at it. They're people like that as well. They have a lot of energy too. One of the ways that they've been classified is it's the sign with the megaphone. Basically, they have the megaphone and they're just announcing everything all the time to people. That's coming from the fire. Okay, and then the last segment. And by the way, you notice that the elements are in order. They're in order, and then they repeat again. So it's always starting with the fire, then you have the earth, and then you have the air, and then you have the water, and then that will repeat again as you're going around the zodiac. And it's actually smart too, because you really don't want to have I shouldn't say that. It's varied. It's varied depending on which elements are bordering each other. It actually, well, especially at the end, I'll get to that in a second with Pisces and Aries. Okay, so then we've got Capricorn, which is the last earth sign. Again, they're very, very grounded people. They're very they want to be immersed in the physical world. They're comfortable here, and that's just how they are. It's they have a lot of solidity to them, Capricorns. Okay, then you have Aquarius, which is actually not a water sign. A lot of people think it is. It's an air sign. The confusion comes because Aquarius is called a water bear, and the water bear is actually it's actually fresh water, and there's a lot of associations with the ancient world with that. And there's association too with Pisces, which is a water sign. Aquarius is kind of carrying the water, which shows the association between Pisces and Aquarius, which border each other. But Aquarians tend to be in the clouds a lot as well. They like to think about abstract concepts. They like to make quirky things and be surrounded by quirky things and kind of do things their own way. And a lot of that creativity is coming from the air, which is, there's a lot to work with in the air. You can pull from a lot of things. For instance, if you're talking about the ether, there's a lot of connections between air and ether. Ether has the source of all information. So that's part of why you're getting that from the air signs. And then Pisces, of course, is the last sign, and it is a water sign. And again, they tend to be very emotional. In Pisces' case, it is a mutable sign. You do have Pisces and Aries next to each other, which is a water and fire sign next to each other, which is actually generally, when you're talking about matching people, you generally don't want to have that, because water puts out fire and fire will put out water. For instance, when you cook, it makes water disappear, turns it into air, so they don't get along with each other, but you can work with each other, but it's going to be some resistance and friction. I'm trying to see, I just want to see quick here. Fire. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So they're actually all based on how it's divided up, they're all next to different signs, or all the fire signs are next to different elements rather on the far side of it. Because if you look down, Sagittarius is next to Capricorn, that's a fire sign next to an earth sign, and then you've got Leo up there next to. Okay, that's next to Virgo that way. Okay, that's just interesting. I'm just kind of puzzling that out. I mean, there's all kinds of combinations. You can spend, even me, and I've been doing this for many years, but you can spend a long time making all the fun connections, that you want to, and saying, oh, I understand now how this is related to this because of how it fits into the wheel. So it's really cool to be able to do that. And if you have this structure, by all means, guys, feel free to pause this and study it as long as you want. Make all the connections you want, and you always have access to this as long as it's uploaded online. So that's how that works. That's how the zodiac works there. And the seasons, of course, and you're talking about the different elements and of the style of sign, cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And then you have the planets, which is the last thing I guess I'm going to go through on the slide. I'll do it fairly quickly because I want to get to the last slide. But basically, each planet is called a ruler of a specific sign. So the ruler means that it compounds its energies with the sign in front of it, and it makes it so that they kind of interact together with each other, and the planet actually imbues the sign with another layer of qualities, essentially. So Mars is the ruler of Aries, and that's Mars is the god of war, essentially the god of intensity. So that's why Aries again they share qualities in that way. Then you have Venus rules Taurus. Venus is a very loving sign, generous, kind, thoughtful, and of course Venus is the goddess of love. So that's how those match up with each other. And then you've got Mercury, which rules Gemini. Mercury is a very fast planet. Geminis traditionally talk very fast. They move very fast. They jump back and forth between things very fast. And then you have Cancer, which is the only sign, by the way, ruled by the moon. So the moon rules Cancer. And it's funny, Karen, we're coming up on Leo in a second, and you have your cat. That's really fantastic. Good timing for sure. So Cancer, ruled by the moon. The moon is said to be the mother in the sky. Very traditional, loving energy, generous, making sure things are taken care of and people are taken care of. And then the sun is the only sign that rules. The only sign that the sun rules is Leo. It's one per each. The sun and the moon each have only one sign that they rule. So you've got the sun ruling Leo, and again, that's the fire sign, the fire of the sun. And Leos are front and center. They're happy. They're smiling, just like the sun when it rises every morning. It's ready to greet us, and it's happy to be here. And that's why Leos are that way. Okay, then you've got Virgo, again, ruled by Mercury. That's where a lot of that nervous energy comes in, that Virgos are moving. They tend to move pretty quickly. And talk pretty quickly as well. And that's because of Mercury. Okay, then you have Libra. Now, Libra is ruled, again, by Venus. Libras are very loving people, and they seek balance and they seek harmony. And that's, again, those are qualities of Venus as well. And Scorpio is ruled by Mars. Again, it's the forthright, out in fronter, like, I'm getting stuff done. If you're standing in my way, you're going to have to get out of my way, or I'm going to literally. I always think of this phrase. I know a lot of Scorpios. It's like, basically, if you don't get out of my way, I'm going to have to plow you down. And they just make the statement, and they actually will do that. So don't think they won't do that, guys. If you know a Scorpio, they will do that. That's a very, very traditional hallmark of that sign. And that comes from Mars. Then we have Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is the larger-than-life figure, can be fairly tyrannical, which is sometimes why, Sagittarius, they just kind of say what they want, and people can feel like they're infringing on their other people's free will and stuff like that, because, that's what tyrants kind of do sometimes. But it's a larger-than-life personality, and they're very fun, just like Jupiter, big fun planet. Okay, we got three more. We've got Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And that's why Capricorns are very serious. Saturn is serious, doesn't say more than he needs to. He's very disciplined. That's why Capricorns are that way. And it's the same with Aquarius, also ruled by Saturn. And Saturn, again, for Aquarius, it makes them into fairly serious people. You don't say more than you have to. Saturn, by the way, also does not generally show emotions. So that's, again, you can really count on that with a well-balanced Aquarius or Capricorn. You're not really going to see any emotions. Very, very serious, kind of very like deadpan style. And then the last one is Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. And again, Pisces are kind of really larger than life people. They have a lot of information coming from the dream world, and that makes it so that they can pull things together, big concepts, big ideas, things of that nature. But they can also be tyrants, just like Sagittarius, because Jupiter can be a tyrant. So sometimes people will feel like Pisces are judging them. It's like, we don't always need to hear that you think I'm doing something wrong or something like that. That's sometimes what happens with Pisces people, is they're always saying, they have so much wisdom that they want to show people what they're doing wrong. And, not all people want to hear that. So that's part of that tyrannical aspect. Okay, so that's it for that slide, Karen. That's the basics of the zodiac. I think we got one more. Is that correct?
Two more. Sorry, two more.
Okay, what's the next one here?
This is the next one.
Okay, I'll go over this really fast. I can do a separate presentation on this one. But basically, this is showing you, it's kind of based on, I'd say it can be based on the flat Earth model. Probably traditionally it would be based on the flat Earth model. But what I'm showing here is how the dimensions are stacked. On the Earth, this is called the cosmic axis. I call it the Earth bubble model. This is what shows what I call the 21 different dimensions in the Earth system. And on the right there, you're going to see I labeled all the planets. So each of the planets is associated with one of the spheres, and along the cosmic axis. It's roughly it's equivalent to where they are in their orbit. You know, like this planet is past this planet, this planet's past this planet. Except the flat Earth model is different because it puts the Earth at the center, not the sun at the center. And I actually feel comfortable looking at it either way. You know, we don't have time in this presentation to talk more about that. We can do that in the future for sure. But for this purposes, I just want people to see that the way that I do astrology, which I believe Western astrology, which I fully believe is the proper way, is that the planets are stacked as I've stacked them on here. And you can see over on the right, you see the Earth at the center. And then above that, you have the seven. Well, the moon is considered a planet. So the moon is the first planet. Then you have the 7 traditional planets all the way up to Saturn. Then you have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, or the equivalent of something powerful like Pluto. It could be like a star, an alternate binary star. It could also potentially be Nibiru. It could be Pluto. Whatever it is, it's whatever is the last step in the Earth system, and it's extremely powerful. And then what you can do is you actually flip that, and it becomes the inverse. And then everything below that, you have the planet has the 2 qualities. If it's above the Earth line, it has the positive quality. If it's below the Earth line, it has the negative quality. And so that's actually what makes all of the dimensions. That's what makes what are called the heavens, which are above the Earth line, and then the hells, which are below the Earth line. I just want to show people that when you're thinking about the orbits, I'd encourage people to think about it like this, and that the Earth has these many, it's like an onion, Karen, you know, it kind of looks like an onion actually, is that they're all layered within each other, and it gives us access to different dimensions depending on how our mind is focused. And it's also giving us access to different realities, different realms that we can live in or visit, different places we can pull our creativity from. We can also communicate with different beings at these different levels, even while we're on Earth. We don't need to go to their planet. We can communicate. If we set our frequency to their dimension, we can communicate with them for sure. Okay, so we can go to the last slide.
I just want to mention, Dave, that you and I did a aliens and astrology episode all about dimensions. And so I'm going to put in the links below the link to that show so that people who want to get more into the dimensional aspects of all of this can catch up. So I just wanted to mention that. And this is our last slide.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Great idea, Karen. Thank you for that. Okay, so this last one, and I mean, we can do a full show on the human body because it's extremely important in terms of astrology, and even not in terms of astrology, but they do fit. And as you had mentioned, Karen, everything fits within one large system. You just have to know how it fits, and you have to be able and willing to actually put it together. I'm doing a lot of that work, hopefully, for people, so you don't have to struggle with it. So you can just see how it's set up and then work with it, you know, and see how all the parallels happen. Okay, so this one, I wrote the human body chakra system. The planets, or the cosmic axis rather, which I just showed you guys in the previous slide, is also equivalent to the human spine. And so the human body, the cosmic axis of the human body is essentially it's the chakra system. And as you can see, if you're looking at I put on the left there 1 to 7, those are the 7 chakras in the human body. And I put the colors that are equivalent because most people are familiar with seeing anywhere from the red color all the way up to the violet color. And that's going to show you how it's structured in your body, actually. So, you know, you can see the colors there. Most people are familiar with that know about the yoga tradition. However, there's other things, too, that people probably are not as aware of. If you go further over in the column, you can see there's a metal. There's actually a metal that is associated with each of the chakras. And that matches up again to the color that it's associated with. It's like a flow chart. You can actually these are all equivalent aspects when you read across it from like the left to the right. They all essentially are talking about the same energy gradient or the same point or the same dimension. So just for example, we go at the bottom here. First chakra is red. You know, most people will be familiar with that when you look at the picture of someone doing yoga or a graphic. And the color of that, the metal of that is silver. Now, if you go up outside, it's a clear night. Go look at the moon and tell me what color that is. It's a silver color. Silver color, the gray or silver, however you want to call it. Okay, why is that? Because that's the metal of the moon. That's why. That's why it's not like purple or something like this, because that's not its color. It's silver. And that's the metal also associated with it. And actually, I'll talk about the fourth one too, because I don't have time for all of them. We don't have time for all of them today. But if you go all the way to the right, you see, of course, that I put the moon there, and that's the planet of the first chakra. So when you're talking about, if you want to focus on the moon aspects of your body, I would encourage focusing on the first chakra if you're trying to understand what the principles of that are. And I probably mentioned this before, but the example is the menstrual cycle. It's based on the cycles of the moon. If you look at the first chakra, that's essentially where the uterus is, I mean, and on top of that, there's actually other patterns. I don't have time for it today, but it's also based on the shape of Scorpio and the shape of Taurus. That's why it's there. That's why the moon is there. That's why it's red. Red, of course, for the blood. And then silver is the metal quality. You can still hear me, right, Karen?
Yes, I just had to put my kitty out because she was tearing up my green screen.
Okay, no problem. No problem. So that's the example.
I'm here for sure.
Okay. So that's one of the examples. I'll just give one more. If you go to the fourth chakra, the color is green. Green is essentially the same letters as the word energy. And that's why our planet is primarily green. It's actually, and I hadn't brought this up before, but it's actually at the center. The center of the cosmic axis is the green color. That's because it's the center. It's the heart. Again, heart is the same word as earth. It's just the different letters arranged differently, showing you that it's at the center. So that's why we have a green earth. Okay, then the metal, of course, is gold. That's why the sun is gold. It's gold color. It's because that's the same thing. The equivalent metal is gold. And then I already listed the sun at the edge of that. I just want to say one thing about this. There's, especially in Mesoamerica, I think it actually might have been the Incans specifically, they often referred to gold as being the tears of the sun. And that's actually a good way to think about it, is that I would feel very comfortable saying that that planet is actually responsible for creating that specific metal. So when you see gold, I would say, yeah, the sun is the creator of that metal, and it governs over that metal. So it's very simple to follow this flow chart across. Then I just want to say really quickly, above that line, I drew a line above the number 7. And above that line, you have traditionally, well, it's Uranus, Neptune again, and Pluto. Which you have, and in the body, the 7th chakra is at the crown of the head here. It's, the violet chakra. And the crown, by the way, you see the edge of 7 there, I put Saturn. Saturn's also called Chronos. So you're talking about, how do I know, again, that the 7th is ruled by Saturn? It's because it's the crown chakra, Chronos. Chronos, Saturn rules that. And that's how you can see that. All these words have already been established in the ancient world for these different parts of our body. And they show us, actually has the meaning tucked inside of it. It can actually show us what it means using the etymology. And I know you had a great show on etymology too, Karen, if you wanted to even feature that too, or put a link in there for that. Etymology is absolutely massive for understanding the structure of how things were in the beginning of creation. You can see the meaning actually tucked in the word. Okay, so then really quickly, the eighth would be the 8th chakra, which is one step above the head. Then you've got the 9th chakra and the 10th chakra. I teach three chakras above the head. A lot of the iconography from the ancient world, if you see people wearing really tall hats, even actually, this gets into some really weird concepts, but the elongated skulls and everything, I believe that they contain the 3 chakras above the head actually within that skull. It was long enough to be able to contain those top 3 chakras. Now, we don't have the elongated head anymore, but for us, they just exist kind of in the ether above our head. So in the 8th chakra, you have what's called the mind, your mental world. That's also where the entire zodiac is. The stars actually exist above the head. Again, if you look at some of the iconography, you can see, I believe, Mother Mary a lot of times with the stars above her head. That's because that's where they are. That's where they are in the model. The stars are the first chakra above the head, which is the 8th sphere, or the 8th chakra. And then the 9th is called, ruled by Neptune. It's called the dream world. It's also features the crystalline sea, which I like to refer to as kind of a shimmering force field that actually keeps the Earth bubble as a separate system. And then when you can get outside of that, then now you have access to other solar systems. 10 is, that's that freedom point where you can actually now feel free to move between different systems and functional systems and things of that nature. But as you know, while we're in the Earth system, it really makes sense to try to understand what is, if you want to understand the structure of how this is actually structured, how things are set up and maintained, and all these different concepts and seasons, then you really need to understand how everything fits into the system. And so with this presentation, I hope it's done that for people. Track it from the beginning. Start with the general cycle of the sun and the seasons, move through the ecliptic, and then into the zodiac, which is created from the ecliptic. And then from the zodiac, now you can apply that to your body, and you can see how all the planets fit inside the body, the colors, the different levels of the cosmic axis. It's all there, Karen. It's all there for us to use and to see. And like I said at the beginning of the presentation, it took a lot of years to be able to compile this information. I didn't even know what I was looking for sometimes, and I would have to wait many months. And then I said, okay, finally, that's all I needed. I just needed to see, for instance, that the Incans, this was a big one for me. When I learned about the tiers of the sun, with the Incan culture, Inti, I believe it's Inti, the god Inti. And it's like, okay, so the sun is being referenced as having gold, or it has a reference to the metal of gold. Okay, so I already saw that somewhere, 6 months before. So now I have like two separate things that's telling me that. And it just goes on and on and on. I mean, then you start talking about the esoteric concepts of the heart and the gold heart. You have a heart of gold. I mean, come on, it's all there. All of it, even the colloquialisms and the phrases we use across cultures, you can see that this is the system that was being used. So I hope it's made it easier for people to understand and giving you an understanding of why astrology is important, why it fits into the baseline Earth system, which is based on the movements of the sun. Of course, the sun powers everything, allows us to live and to eat, keeps us warm. And so, I just want us to be able to work with what the system in place is, so that we're not questioning. You have to get your framework solid. If you don't have a solid framework, then you're literally just giving opinions. Oh, this is what I think, or this is what I think. Well, when I say that this is what I think, I have probably the last 8,000 years backing me up. And so it's not me. If people don't like, I hope people like me, but if they don't like me, it's not me saying this. Okay, this is the system of the ancient world. This is how the Earth was explained. And if you talk about the golden age, in terms of human evolution, when you hit the golden age, which is roughly 12,000 years ago, you're going down for 12,000 years. It's part of the cycle too. So where we are now, not really understanding these concepts very well, is a function of where we are in the cycle of time, which is the age of Aquarius, which is actually opposite to the golden age. So it's no wonder that the ideas that the mainstream carries are not these ideas. Now, the small amount of us that have woken up and are in the process of waking up, this is for us right now. And I'm very thankful for instance, for the qualities of Aquarius that have allowed me access to the internet, which is Aquarius is all about technology, because without the internet, I couldn't have done this. So when I look at why I came into the cycle at this time, it's like right as the internet was getting bigger, and computers were being established for me, it just so happens that I was ready to learn the concepts that were available online. So I'm very appreciative for that. Nothing is coincidence, though, at all. I think you'd agree with that, Karen, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I just have found this presentation so interesting, Dave. And I'd really like to do another show, perhaps next month, where we could talk about astrology and the body and look at all the things that correspond to do with our body, which also is basically also using astrology for our health. But I have one question, Dave, and that is the colors of the chakras are coordinated with different planets. So if we go to our astrology and we look at what planet we're governed by, would that indicate which of our chakras is the strongest, or would that indicate which of our chakras is the weakest? Or what would be the correspondence there?
Yeah, I would say you can certainly make those conclusions. It's something you really have to work with. And actually, of course, I could help people with that if they wanted to go that road. I could help formulate a pattern that's going to make sense for you in terms of your body and how it's actually interacting. but I would say, well, for the first thing I would say is that your sun sign is your driving principle. So what I would first, in terms of your health, the first thing I would look at is what your sun sign is. Now, each of the signs of the zodiac is equivalent to a part of the body, starting with Aries at the top of the head, and Pisces is the 2 feet. That's why there's 2 fish in Pisces, because it's 2 feet. And by the way, the feet look like fins of a fish. It's almost like the fins of a fish were taken off the fish and stuck on our bodies. It's actually, that's kind of what happened. I'm not trying to be controversial again, but the zodiac, the word zodiac, it means essentially like the wheel of animals. And you can see that from Mesopotamia, that's the meaning. And so the whole point is that, okay, why, and by the way, the human is Aquarius. So you see the Aquarius on where they are on the wheel. And so you're like, we're the only human there. The rest of the things that look like people are actually more like principles. And then the rest are animals. So we should really question what's going on here. And actually it gets really interesting. And I don't want to get into this. Well, we can maybe in the future, maybe in a couple months or a few months or something like that. But when you're talking, this is a very important topic for aliens, Karen, too. So this is probably something we should do. And people are probably actually not going to see this, to be honest with you, anywhere else. And so I hope people can tune in for that and watch our show. Is that when you talk about hybridization, and there's a question that alien species have been changing our DNA or modifying our DNA and changing our bodies and things like that, you really have to question why or how the animals got integrated into that. Because you can have, here's a good example. You can have like a cow. A cow is, of course, Taurus. So if you have I'm talking about an actual cow. You have a cow that's born, and the cow, this is really interesting. It should make people really think. You have a cow that's born during the sign of Aquarius. That cow actually has the mind of a human. It's using the framework of the human mind as its driving principle. Now, if a human is born in the sign of Taurus, it's the opposite. It's the cow mind. It's actually the cow mind in the human mind. The human is using the cow mind as its driving principle. The only person that uses the human mind as their driving principle is an Aquarius person, because that's where the man or the woman is on the wheel. So it brings up a lot of interesting questions, and also about transmigration of the soul, humans moving between animal forms and animals moving to human forms, even into plant forms and things like that. It's all structured so that that's possible. And I believe it was a very intelligent species. I believe actually that it was the dragons. If I have to say who did it, who created the earth at the beginning, I would say not the Dracos, by the way. I'm talking about the beautiful, iridescent, wonderfully kind and wise dragons. The full structured dragon with the long tail, the floppy ears and the iridescent scale. That's the one I'm talking about. That's the kind, for me, the kind mother that actually created originally, before all the other species came in and tried to tamper with things. I believe it was the dragons that did it. So, I have to applaud them. I think they did a really good job, and it's really interesting seeing how they structured the system. And it's helpful to see that so that we can understand what we're working with, because otherwise it's just big question marks around everything. And I hope we're getting past that. I don't want to see the question marks anymore. I want to see, oh, I understand that, and let's move it somewhere where we can all benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Karen, sorry. I want to add one
Sure.
last thing. I'm sorry, because you had mentioned the body. The other thing I would look for, this is what I was going to say. So for instance, an Aquarius person, I would be really careful about your shins and your calf muscles. In terms of injuries, it's more likely you're going to have an injury there because your energy is actually focused there on the body. That's the part of the body that's Aquarius. And then the other part that I would say is you want to pay attention to your retrograde planets. You have a retrograde planet in a specific sign, then you want to focus on not only on the sign or the part of your body, but also the planets are going to tell you about different systems of your body. So focus on different, like for instance the lymph system or the nervous system. You want to focus on those things if you have retrograde planets. So there's really not a limit. You just have to know what you're looking for, but I guarantee you it's in the chart. You just have to kind of find it.
Yep. Now, Dave, we're quickly running out of time, but I would like you to just share with our audience what you're able to help them with, where you're available, If people would like to have their natal charts done and have them explained properly, what,
Yep.
do you want to tell everyone about your services and what you can help people with?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, if you guys want to get in contact with me for any reason, I do provide a lot of services. Of course, I'll go through them quickly. But the best place is probably Facebook. It's just type in Dave Petrella. You'll see it says astrology, biology, spiritual guidance at the top. Instagram, Dave Petrella 12. I also posted a lot of pictures from my recent trip, cross country trip, which was a 100-day trip. I did a lot of research. We can talk about that too in the future as well, Karen. I'll put some pictures up there for the viewers. So yeah, Instagram, Dave Petrella 12, and then also my YouTube channel, which I finally got very visible. So actually, all you guys have to do now, if you want to find my channel, is just type in Dave Petrella at YouTube and scroll down, like 5 videos, and you'll find my channel. You see my picture there, and it says this is the channel. And please feel free to subscribe to that. I post all the new interviews and videos and everything on that channel. So those 3 are the way to contact me. And then I would say that if people want any astrology services having to do with tropical astrology, I can help with that. I do a focus on birth charts, which is, your personal time that you were born. It tells you about you and your body specifically. I also do relationship matching. It can be and family dynamics too. It can be between family members. It could even be friends or business applications or romantic applications to see if you have something that is good to work with, and to understand also why you're getting certain responses from people and why they're responding to you in certain ways. It's not random. It's in the charts. You find everything in the chart. The only thing, I'll say this really quickly, the only thing you don't necessarily find in the chart is past life experience, and that's something that the spirit, which is what I would say your essential nature is, actually maintains those memories as part of your spirit, which the spirit is actually the true you. The astrology is actually put on top of that. The spirit kind of gets to exist inside of the astrology, and you use the astrology to function and to move around and to learn stuff. But your spirit is actually way above that. And even on the cosmic axis, you can see that it's actually above. It's really in the 10th sphere is really where the spirit is featured, which is the freedom component. But anyway, I do all those things. We can look at health topics if you're interested in terms of astrology as well. I can pick dates for people if they want. For instance, if you're trying to pick a wedding or something, I look at both charts and I'll see if there's problematic areas that I would say don't go here. Pick it. Maybe you want to pick like your MC for a wedding or your ascendant node or something like that, as long as it works with the other person's chart. So I can do that as well. I don't do a huge amount of that, but I'm happy to do that for people if you want that. And then because I believe in the free will too, make your own decisions from your heart, and you're going to get to where you're supposed to be either way. And then when you're talking about biology, that went into some of the astrology with health, but it also has a lot to do with fasting, learning how to circulate your fluids properly, choosing the proper foods, working with oils, which is from the principle of Ayurvedic medicine. It's kind of like I call it pre-Ayurvedic medicine. It's actually simpler than that. Doesn't make it easy at all, but it's a lot simpler to understand. So I do that in terms of health. And then the last part, of course, is spiritual guidance, which Karen, I know you do that as well. And I would encourage people to contact Karen as well. She's great at doing that, giving people a good understanding of what's going to work best for them. So either of us can do that for you. And yeah, just let us know. And if you guys, even I was going to mention too, Karen, if people have like a guest they want to see, by all means, send us a message and we'll try to contact them. I want to, it's just for you guys. I love being with Karen. I love talking, but I want people to get a lot out of this. And it's a big community, guys. we're trying to bring people together here. So I want as much involvement as possible and get excited about it. Share it with your friends and share it with your family and everything. And tell people about what you learn.
Absolutely. Now, next time is going to be November 27th, and we have a guest. It's going to be Aurora Seraphine. And Aurora is an amazing human being. We don't have enough time to get into all her wonderful abilities and her knowledge, skills, and everything. So I know you'll want to come back and check out Aurora on the Aliens and Astrology show. Aurora is one of the few people who has such complete faith in her higher self, her soul, her spirit, that she has a completely spirit-led life. And I find her very interesting and very inspirational as well. So I'll put in the links below the show we did on the dimensions so that you can all check that out if you haven't already seen it. And I'll also put a link to the other show that I host called the Quantum Guide Show, where I interviewed Paul Knight and his amazing ability to use etymology to get at some amazing information that I think all of you, if you don't already know, will definitely want to know. All of these things Dave and I bring to you is to help you to have more tools in your spiritual tool belt so that you can make the best use of your life, because indeed we are becoming the change that we want to see in the world. And that's about it for today. Dave, do you have any last words?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for watching, continuing to follow the program. I mean, I'm in it for the long haul. I think Karen is too. So I'm not going anywhere, guys. So please get involved and let us know if you need some services and what you'd like to see in terms of content. I'm happy to talk about literally any topic at all. I think Karen is pretty much in the same boat. So let us know what you want to hear. I also want to mention really fast, me and Aurora are actually good friends. I met Aurora at an Ascension conference actually in Nashville, Tennessee earlier this year. William Henry, the Star of Ancient Aliens, actually put on the conference. And we got to meet him, which is really fantastic. He's absolutely brilliant, man. And so we formed a friendship, and then she appeared actually on Karen's Quantum Guide show. She's done a great job. I mean, I love listening to the content. She's got such good perspective too, and it's a lot of Karen, I really appreciate the female perspective, coming from two women as well. I like to hear how that is in terms of how I would perceive it, being a male. Especially having to do some of the things you and her have talked about in terms of childbirth and being a mother and everything, I find very important. And it's I think it's important to have perspectives for men and women. And let's get this in. Again, it's one big family. We're an Earth family, and we're here to help each other and figure it out. So I love Aurora too. So I can't wait to have her on the show.
Okay, so that's it for today for Aliens and Astrology. Thanks again, Dave, for your presentation. I'm going to say goodbye to all the viewers. Wish you the best week ever, and we'll see you next time on Aliens and Astrology. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for joining Dave and I for the Aliens and Astrology show. Become the change you want to see in the world. Subscribe to our YouTube channels. Click the like button and share this show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links will be in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Well, you challenge my perception. I shift uneasily as I try to justify how I value your suggestions. Ideas full of life when I'm empty of my own. And 5 minutes before I was okay, now the curtain drops to the floor. Leaves me weak and begging for more. When I think I get it, it flutters and vanishes away.